Well, after last week's quieter moments, Mr. Robot goes full force with easily its wackiest and most insane episode yet.
Don't change the channel, don't touch that dial. We got it all on UHF. Take off your sneakers.
Hey guys, it's Kevin and my review for Mr. Robot Season 4, Episode 11, Exit, and holy shit, this episode was all kinds of insane. And look, I was expecting for this episode to be something really big, considering the way that last week was a lot quieter, the way that last week, things were done in a much more character-based way. It really seemed like it was going to be that calm before the storm. So I knew something insane was going to go down in this episode. This meeting between Elliot and White Rose, I knew it was going to send us towards the end game. I knew it was going to send us towards something really crazy. I was not anticipating what we were going to get here. And what does this all mean? I'll get into that in a little bit. There's obviously a lot to unpack here, so we're just going to dive right into it. So, similar to other episodes I've reviewed this season, this is one of those episodes where it's kind of hard to talk about this episode without going in chronological order. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to go in the order that things happen. I'm going to get into what worked, what didn't work, all that kind of stuff. Starting off with actually the first moment of this episode where, the way things ended with White Rose, the last time we saw her, I knew for a fact that White Rose was not going to be killed. Obviously, not just because we knew that confrontation was going to happen between Elliot and White Rose. We saw in the trailer, we knew it hadn't taken place yet. Not just because of that, but also because this is White Rose. White Rose is not someone that's just going to, sit around and linger and accept her fate. She's not going to go down without a fight. So the moment where we see the SWAT team come out and we thought it was them, just really sticking it to the Dark Army and just completely annihilating them, turns out it was the other way around. The Dark Army completely took hold of the SWAT team. The entire SWAT team has been, there was this whole massacre that went down, and when White Rose was walking around and basically said that, you wanted Zhang, but White Rose was only here, even though it says a lot about how good of a character the White Rose is, that even though we despise her, and we hate everything that she's done, we hate the fact that she's killed Angela, we hate the fact that she's killed Santiago, we hate the fact that she's ruined Dom's life and things like that, when she said White Rose is the only one here, I audibly cheered. I audibly loved that moment. I thought it was such a badass moment for White Rose and really does bring her arc to full circle. She's always wanted to be White Rose in that way. This is who she's always wanted to be recognized as, but she's always kind of been afraid to because she wasn't accepted. But now she finally can be. Everyone knows that her and White Rose, that Zhang and White Rose are one and the same in that way. And I thought this was a really great moment for her. I love that she ended up getting the upper hand here. I love that we got to see the Dark Army still isn't going down without a fight. And it really just sets things in motion quite well for this final confrontation. We don't know exactly what's going on here, but we know the White Rose, she's focused on her project. That's where they're moving on towards. And I thought that we were going to cut from this and go back to the whole plane thing with Dom, but I think this episode pretty much confirmed that that's not at all where we are headed. I think that Dom is safely on that plane. I don't think that the Dark Army is meddling there. I think they are fully focused on the project because everything we see with them very much point towards that. But either way, I thought this was a really great way to set the episode. I loved everything that was going on here. The lawn take, especially the way we solve that unravel with the bodies all over her apartment. Such a aesthetically pleasing shot. Such a amazing, just such amazing camera work going on there. And BD1, I mean, this was his finest hour for sure. He just went all out in this episode. And this was just a little taste of what we were about to get here. But obviously, the big stuff to talk about in this episode is everything going on with Elliot, because while last week's episode focused almost completely on Darlene and Dom, this episode is very much just Elliot and his desire to, his desire to get these answers. Even though, yes, he's ruined White Rose financially, he knows that she still is working on this project, and he is destined to find out what exactly it is that she is selling. If what she's selling is possibly true, how can he stop it? Is this possibly, what is her real agenda here? And I like that in the beginning we have Mr. Robot and him trying to tell Elliot that, like, this is a terrible idea. He's going down this really dark path. Again, it really does show how much these roles have switched this season. Mr. Robot has been the more rational one. He's been the one trying to keep things in line. He's been the one trying to keep Elliot in check. But we also know that his main goal now is to get Elliot to realize, and recognize his third personality and for all that to come to fruition. That's Mr. Robot's main goal right now. So he's really not in the mood for this whole mission, but this is something that Elliot is very squarely focused on. And I like that Mr. Robot is telling him that this is just going to keep going. Like, if he, this is never going to end. There's always going to be another corporation out there. There's always going to be one last mission. He's never going to be able to stop. And I think for someone like Elliot, who has always been about hacking and things like that, and who we've seen this season has made some really irrational decisions, this was definitely something that I think Mr. Robot does have a point with. It's either Elliot continues to do this for the rest of his life, or he just accepts the fact that there are some things that he should not meddle in. There are some things that he probably should just, let it be in that way. He should just, let it so he doesn't know much about it, because it doesn't really involve him that much, and maybe he doesn't need to be that involved in this. But alas, we know this is Elliot. We know Elliot is similar to White Rose. He's not going to go down without a fight, and I think they did a really great job with saying that up there. And his final goodbye with Darlene, oh my god, I mean, it was definitely really well done last week, but here we get to see the full goodbye, and this very much felt like a final goodbye. I mean, I think Darlene, like I said, she's definitely going to be back in the finale, because we know that she's the key in that way to unlocking that third personality, but considering the way things end up going in this episode, I think this was probably the most crucial moment of the entire episode. Besides, obviously, the stuff with Elliot and White Rose, this was the most crucial moment, and they got it done perfectly, with him saying that, she's helped him, and he thanks him, thanks her for not giving up and things like that. It's such a effective moment. Darlene has been the one throughout the entire show, besides a couple others, that has always been in support of Elliot. And even when he was doing something that she wasn't really, in favor of, she still did it because he was her brother, and her most important goal has always been to connect with her brother in that way. And so I think this final goodbye was pretty much perfect. I love the way it was done. I love that he gives her this, this fun little, the last thing that he wants her to remember is just, have those Sour Patch Kids on the plane. He doesn't know if he's going to see her again. He doesn't know if he's going to come out of this alive, but he knows one thing, and that his sister has done a lot for him, and he feels that she deserves to get away. He feels that she deserves this. She's earned it in that way, and this shows how much Elliot has really evolved as a character. In past seasons, he wouldn't give Darlene a choice. She would have to have assisted him. She would need to help him with this, and I like the fact that she told him that she was done, and he accepts it. He lets her go off on her own, and I just think this was the perfect moment between the two. It honestly did get me pretty teary-eyed, and like I said, considering where the episode ends up going, I think it's maybe the most important scene of the entire episode here. Alright, so with all that said, let's just get into this whole confrontation, because this is something we've been building up throughout the entire season, and my god, they did not disappoint. This is easily one of the finest scenes in the entire show, and I love the fact that this went on for like a good, 11 minutes, but you couldn't even tell because we're just so invested in what's going on here, because something this season has done an excellent job with is really showing how similar White Rose and Elliot are, and through this conversation alone, we see that there are a lot of similarities between them. Both of them feel like they've been hurt by the world. Both of them feel like there are a lot of problems with the world that they feel are not being attended to, and that they need to be the one to fix in that way, and they go to extreme measures to do so. And both of them have committed tons of heinous tragedies, mainly just to achieve this sort of goal. Elliot, obviously, it's been more inadvertent, while White Rose, it's been more deliberate in that way, but there are a lot of similarities there. So I like that White Rose is very, again, similar to episode 9, she's very approachable here. She really is willing to work with Elliot, but you also see just how desperate she is. She's doing everything she can to try to get him on board. She really feels that they can work together, that they have this similarity, that, she reinforces the fact that his group was named F Society, which of course stands for Fuck Society and things like that, and that, she also feels that the world is inherently bad. But then there's a lot of things that Elliot does not agree with. The idea that she feels that basically everyone in the world is terrible and that the entire world has been corrupted and things like that. And that there's, the people that are dead, she's not actually killing, she's giving them a new life. She's helping them go on a better path, that everyone in the world that has turned evil can in fact be good. Even people like Price, she feels that they can be good in that way. And again, knowing what White Rose has been through, especially with her boyfriend committing suicide and things like that, we can see why she feels that way. The show has done a lot to get us to understand White Rose's viewpoint here, but she's still insane. And the show very much knows this, that she is very much insane. She's very much out of her mind. And even Elliot, someone who, again, I think a couple seasons ago would have agreed with her. Remember, in the beginning of the show, White Rose was viewed as an ally. She wasn't viewed as the problem. Evil Corp was viewed as, E-Corp was viewed as, Evil Corp and things like that. They were the main adversary here. But the reason why White Rose over time has become more and more of this, evil presence and someone that Elliot needs to bring down is just because of how radical she really is. And especially in this conversation, I mean, even though we can understand where she's coming from, her views are just completely insane. She's saying so many illogical things here. There's so many things that just don't work at all, that don't make sense at all. And her machine, especially, Elliot keeps telling her, like, it doesn't work. There's no way this could possibly work. The fact that she literally killed all of the Washington Township people, I mean, you can tell she's really thought this through. And in a sense, it is kind of genius in that way, but she also is still very much insane. And I love that Elliot even telling her that this isn't going to work on her. You think for a moment maybe it will. Maybe this will actually work on him. Maybe she is going to brainwash him like Angela. But Elliot is a lot more clever than that. Elliot has evolved way more than that. And he's learned a lot just from this past week alone. He's still grappling with that reveal that his father sexually abused him. It's not something that he's been able to process because he just simply really hasn't had the time to. He is still kind of grappling with that still. He also has, hurt characters like Olivia, someone that he clearly did care about, and he didn't want to have to hurt her, but it was really the only way for him to get this information and for him to make sure that the hack went down in the way it needed to. So he's had to do a lot of risky things, and it's because of all those things that his conversation with White Rose feels so satisfying in that way. Because yes, he starts off talking about how much he hated the world and how much he felt that everyone was out to get him and how all these corporations were the problem. But then he realized how many people actually cared about him, and he learned to see the good in other people and realize the error of his ways. And it's a really amazing message in that way. The show has a lot to say here about redemption and how even though there are a lot of people that were bad, Elliot was able to see the good in them. And I think he was very, a lot of people are saying, oh, this was very much about Terrell. I don't think it was just Terrell. Yes, I think he's certainly thinking about Terrell because, I mean, the last thing that Terrell said to him, one of the last things he said before he died is that he admired who Elliot was and he wished that he had a much more complicated life and that he wasn't as well esteemed as he was and things like that, and that there wasn't this huge expectation of him, in that way. So I think he is very much thinking about Terrell, but he's also thinking about characters like Price, someone that he very much despised. And even though Price didn't like him very much, he saw the good in Price because he saw how hurt he was. He saw how much he was affected by the Dark Army and things like that. He saw the good in people like Angela, who even though she had this very radical sense, he still saw the good in her. He still knew the kind of person that she was. He knew, that she was brainwashed in that way, that she didn't actually feel this way and things like that. He saw the good in many individuals over time, whether it was And especially when it comes to Mr. Robot, someone that was directly opposing him throughout the rest of the show, he has learned to come to terms with that. So this whole speech, when he's talking about how these people love him and he realizes that there are people that do care about him and that he can't just go around and hurting everyone, is such an amazing development for Elliot. I love the way this was done. I love the way that he tells her that she can't see through, that if she can't see that, then she's the worst of the worst in that way. I just think it's such a amazing moment of character development, and it really does show how much this character has evolved. And yeah, all of this has been within a year, but a lot has happened in that year, and it's not too crazy to think because of everything that Elliot's been through, whether it's been Shayla's death, whether it's been Terrell's, whether it's been him again with the reveal that his father sexually abused him, whether it's been him even smaller things, reminding himself that Darlene's a sister and things like that, whether it's him realizing that he was responsible for all of these terrible things and him trying to do what he can to repair all of that. This is an Elliot that has been through a lot. This is an Elliot that has seen a lot in people, but he also has learned a lot as well. He's learned how good society can be, that society isn't corrupted in that way. Yes, there's a lot of individuals that are on the wrong side of things, but he always is trying to see the good in them. He wants to actively help people, and this is why he's not going to give in to White Rose in that way. I think a season ago, he very much would have done that, but the fact that he's not now, it just makes it so much more effective. It makes this moment work so much more in that way, and I think that whole scene, I mean, between between the scene where he is grappling with the reveal that his father sexually abused him, and now this, I mean, Rami Malek is just going all out, and that Golden Globe was so well deserved, and it's scenes like this that very much do show that. But again, it really does stem back to how similar these two are, but also how different they are. Yes, White Rose and Elliot have both been hurt by society, but they're going in much different directions in that way. White Rose is very much opposed to it, while Elliot is doing what he can to help those, and it shows why Elliot is such a rootable character in that way. And even those that have hurt him, he recognizes that that's just what they have to do. That's not because they're bad people. It's that people do terrible things to each other. That's just humanity in that way. And he knows that there isn't really a way to fix that. And so again, it shows that even though there are similarities from White Rose and Elliot, two people that have very much been hurt by the world, they're going about things in completely different ways. White Rose is someone who's very closed-minded. She isn't willing to listen to reason. She's gone, and as a result, she has gone completely out of her mind, and she's become very demented, and she's felt that it's her goal to restore the world in that way, and her way of doing that is essentially Thanosing everyone, while Elliot feels that he is someone that, while yes, there are a lot of people that will do terrible things, he always tries to see the good in people, and that there isn't really a way to fix that. And it just shows how much that character has evolved, and I just think that it's such an excellent job with that here. But then we get to the stuff that you guys really want me to talk about, because the fact that Elliot does not agree to this deal. White Rose has set off the machine anyway. Alarms start going crazy. We have no idea what's about to happen, and White Rose just takes herself out of the equation right then and there. She's not going to, she's like, okay, you know what? I'm not persuading you enough. I'm going to let you make this decision on your own. And I kind of saw this as White Rose believes her machine, even before we saw what ends up happening, White Rose believes her machine is going to work. She wants to be reunited with her lover and things like that, and this is her way of offing herself. She feels like she's serviced her purpose in the world. Now she can go off to another one. That's kind of why she did what she did. So now we have this situation with Elliot and Mr. Robot, and oh my god, I mean, look, there have been a lot of intense scenes in Mr. Robot, but I have not been on the edge of my seat this much, I think, ever in the show, because we really have no idea what's going to happen in this scene. Anything could end up happening. They could just die of radiation poisoning or something like that. I didn't think they were actually going to do that. but just watching Elliot try to figure out this game and beat this game, and watching Mr. Robot frantically try to push him into solving this and trying to find a way out of there, but then realizing they're trapped. I mean, that whole scene was so masterfully done. And then, oh my god, the moment where Elliot basically realizes that there's nothing they can do, that they're stuck there, and he tells Mr. Robot that he loves him. They have this really nice goodbye. It all just felt so perfect. This was, without the stuff that comes after, this was shaping up to be, one of the best episodes of the entire show. If this was the entire episode, it would be a very high, like, A+ for me. I thought this whole stuff was so masterfully done. They did an excellent job with showing how Elliot's curiosity might end up killing him. I didn't know if he was gonna die here, but hell, they could have done that. They could have done something crazy like that and just killed him, and then the finale is us, like, watching him slowly die or something like that, which, I mean, they could still be doing that, who knows, but either way, it does not change the fact that this was an amazing way to close out that stuff. I mean, this is obviously, I don't think, the end of Elliot and Mr. Robot, but the way that this portion of the episode ended was so fantastic. I love the way it was done. I love the fade to red and things like that. It just gave you this feeling of uncertainty, but it also gave you this feeling of satisfaction. I really loved the way this was all done, and I just thought everything was so masterfully done here. But now we get to the part of the episode that I have a lot of things to say about. So, after this whole thing went down, I realized, holy shit, we still have a half an hour left. What could possibly happen now? So it turns out that White Rose's machine, we've thought all this time that, I at least thought that she was crazy, that she was convincing herself that this was real, that it was just a bunch of it was just a bunch of bullshit. There was no possible way that this was actually going to happen. It turns out her machine might have actually worked, because we find Elliot in this alternate reality. Suddenly, he is much more well established. He's in this very high ranking position at Allsafe still. Yeah, Allsafe is still a thing here. He's engaged to Angela, which, I mean, it was really nice to see Portia Doubleday again. They played that so well. We get to see him, just be more well-respected. He's got a good relation with his father. It's essentially watching what would happen if Elliot went down a much better path, and I think one in which his father didn't sexually abuse him. I think that's a big portion of this as well, because the way that Edward acts towards Elliot in this episode, I just don't see him doing something like that. But again, that's kind of the way they misled us throughout the entire show, so maybe he is still doing that. I mean, we're not entirely sure, but either way, it's completely changed Elliot's story. Terrell is now the Elliot-like figure, who he's still alive in this reality. He is much more antisocial. He is someone who is really trying to, he's very much focused on the idea of parallel worlds and things like that. There's maybe some skepticism that he might actually know what's going on. To be honest with you, I don't really know a lot of what's going on here. I think there's some possibilities for sure, but I don't really know where this is headed, and I don't know if it's the right direction for the show, because this is such a rapidly different direction than where I thought we were headed, that it's one that could ultimately kill this show. And look, I have full faith in Sam Esmail. I really think he's going to deliver something great. But I always have that doubt. There's always that worry that when you love a show like this and it's just been knocking it out of the park, there's always that worry that it's going to go out with a whimper. And considering that this show has been so grounded in realism, especially this season, it's been so brutally realistic and honest in that way, and it's always felt so real in that sense, it would be very weird if the show is suddenly going in a sci-fi direction, because this is sci-fi. If you're introducing parallel worlds, that's time travel, that's sci-fi. So I don't know if I buy into the idea that this is from White Rose's machine, that her machine worked and Elliot's now in a parallel world. What I kind of hope is happening, and look, this could be completely untrue, this is just kind of something cool that I think would happen, is that if you notice, a big part of this alternate reality, everything's good for Ellie, but there is one stipulation, is that it is completely devoid of Darlene. Even if she is in this world, which I don't think she is, she is not around with Elliot. You know, we see that photo of him and Edward and Magda, who also is conspicuously absent. Darlene is not in that photo. She's just completely been deleted from this reality. She's been taken out of the equation entirely. And we see that, you know, she's not there. Elliot's having a really good life and things like that. What I think this could be hinting towards is that a lot of the season has been about how important that relationship is. The relation between Elliot and Darlene, how profound it is, how much those two depend on one another, how much they need one another, but also how different they would be without each other. It kind of reminds me of the scene with Darlene in season 2 where she's talking to Cisco about how she randomly one day got lost at a carnival and she happened upon this woman, and this woman, even though she kidnapped her, or Darlene was happy because she was finally being recognized. She was finally being nurtured and cared in the proper way. She didn't feel like she was, you know, being ignored like she was throughout her entire life. But the one thing is that she didn't have Elliot, and she felt that she needed him. She doesn't know who she'd be without Elliot. And I think the same thing applies to I think the same thing applies to how, you know, that Elliot wouldn't be the same without Darlene. And I think a big part of what this could be about is that Elliot needs Darlene. Elliot's going to realize how important Darlene really is, and that she's done so much for him. Maybe he ends up sacrificing himself here. Maybe he realizes how important she is, that he's going to put himself over her. You know, she's been so selfless all of his life for him. Maybe he needs to do the same for her. And in a sense, he's already doing that. Like, he's letting her go off and, you know, find her path and things like that. But I think he might end up taking it one step further. And I also think that this is how he's going to find out about the third personality. Maybe through this reality, he's, you know, we know that this Elliot at the end of the episode comes face to face with our Elliot. So maybe this is the third personality. Maybe the reason why he didn't remember his sister is because this third personality has always been inside of him. This is not something that is just, you know, recently taken hold. This is not something that has manifested. This is something that's always been with him in the same way that Mr. Robot's always been with him. But similar to Mr. Robot, you know, unlike Mr. Robot, it doesn't come out that often. And this is his way, I think, of realizing that third personality's in there. Again, I know it's a crazy theory. It's a big leap to take, but truly, I mean, that's what this is going to be. It's either that they're doing something crazy, or this is in Elliot's head. This is him kind of coming to terms with his inevitable fate, because, to be honest with you, I don't see the show ending with Elliot surviving. I really don't. I think they've done a lot in the show to imply that Elliot is going to die, especially the fact that so many of the main characters are dead. The only characters that are still alive that are main characters are Elliot, Darlene, and Dom. That's it. Those are the only characters at this point that are alive. So I kind of feel like because that Elliot just might die in this finale. Maybe he is dying a slow death. Maybe he is being exposed to radiation or something like that. Or maybe he needs to sacrifice himself in the world. I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that the world consists of mostly dead people. Mostly people that are dead in our world. You know, Angela's there, Terrell's there, White Rose is there, and she's much better off. She's become this, you know, celebrity of sorts. Everyone respects her. She's doing things for others in that way. So she has had a much better life as well. So again, it's either we can take this at face value and accept the fact that White Rose wasn't crazy and that her machine works, or this is a much more psychological exercise for Elliot. And I kind of feel like it's the latter more than the former. And the reason I think this is because there are many moments throughout this episode that indicate that something is not right about this reality. Elliot frequently has these headaches, and he will remember things from his past. Like, he'll see the F Corp symbol, but it briefly turns into E Corp. Or he'll, you know, be transfixed on White Rose, who in this reality he has had zero interaction with. She's completely insignificant to him, but yet he's so focused on her. So I do feel there is something much bigger going on here. I feel there's something that we're just not understanding, and I want to hope that that's the case. I want to hope the show's not going in a sci-fi direction, because I just don't think this is the show to do it. I think it's a cool idea, but I just don't think that's the right way to wrap up the show, especially this late in the game. If you were going to introduce this, you should have done that way earlier on. So I don't know if I like the idea they're going to wrap things up on a sci-fi note, so I'm kind of trying to, I'm trying to hold on to this idea that that's not where they're going, that this is something much different entirely. But again, we'll just have to see the way things do end up playing out there. I kind of feel like we're gonna find out what's going on once Angela and Elliot's wedding takes place. And no, it's not just because of the scene in season 1 where we have that, where he has the fantasy of them getting married, but then things get really ugly because they start revealing secrets to each other and turns into a horror movie. I don't think that's where this is going. I feel like it just kind of makes sense because they've been setting up this wedding so much and that they keep hinting at it. I feel like something's gonna go down there. And once we get to see this Elliot and Angela's wedding, I think that's when we're going to realize more of what's going on here, what's really happening. Again, I can't really tell you. I can't quite put my finger on what this all means. And again, what I'm saying could very well be true, but knowing that it's Sam Esmail, I feel there's a completely different reasoning for this. I feel there's something else going on here that we're just not seeing at the moment, and we'll have to see what that's really about. Either way, I think this is an interesting idea. I think this is very ambitious, and I really respect the show for doing something different. It's just, this is, considering that this is the penultimate episode, if you want to consider the finale as a two-part finale and not two separate episodes, which I am pretty much, even though I'll probably, rate them as two separate episodes, as I do for every finale that does that. It's a bit weird to take this direction, to go in this sci-fi type direction, and I hope it's not one of those things where he's just going here because he truly did not know how else to end the show. I want to believe that Sam Esmail knows what he's doing. I want to believe that Sam Esmail has had something in play for a while, and I do still believe that. I don't want you guys to think that this is like ruining the show for me or something. I'm just saying there's always that doubt, and I'm a little bit worried with where this could potentially go, because the first half of this episode I thought was masterful. Again, I thought they perfectly showed the dichotomy between Elliot and White Rose, showing how much Elliot has evolved as a character, really giving us this great message of redemption and seeing the good in others and things like that. His tearful goodbye with Darlene, his goodbye to Mr. Robot, all of that was just perfection. I love the way all that was done. White Rose's opening scene. And then this second half comes in, and I've seen this episode twice, and I just don't really know what to make of it. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas, but I just don't know where it's really headed. I don't know what it's really all about. I think it might have something to do with the Darlene thing, because again, she's not around in this universe, and I think that's very significant. I think there's definitely going to be something more going on there. But again, we'll just have to see where it all really ends up going. So, yeah, that's really all I can say about this episode. I mean, technical-wise, they were on fire here. Sam Esmail just continues to deliver in terms of that stuff. Cinematography was at an all-time high. The scene between Elliot and White Rose was so claustrophobic in that way. You really felt like you were trapped in that room, and I thought it gave a different energy than that of the Angela and White Rose scene. That scene, you're so confused with what's going on. It's all just stuff that's being rapidly introduced to you. Whereas this, we have more of an idea of what she's going to do, and it feels much more satisfying in that way. And I thought they did a really good job with that. And then the score here I thought was so on point, especially in the second half of the episode. The scenes where Elliot is going about his day, listening to those lyrics. I mean, again, you can tell there's definitely something off about this reality. The editing here, I thought was definitely very well done. The choice to have the first half be this very intense sort of, thriller in that way, and then have the second half be something else entirely, I think was a really cool idea. And I like the way that they distinguished the two universes. I mean, the camera angles were completely different. Everything was a lot brighter. They just did a really good job with, showing the differences between the two universes, and I definitely really did love that. But ultimately, like I said, a lot of this episode is just contingent on how the finale is going to be. If the finale delivers in the way that I think it can, I think I'll overall end up really loving this episode. But if the finale is disappointing, then maybe this episode will be the thing that killed Mr. Robot. And I hope that's not the case, because I've just been adoring everything about the season. I've been praising it constantly. I've been just constantly looking forward to this show. I love discussing it with you guys, and I hope that this is not the thing that kills it, because I think there's a lot of potential here. I think there's a lot of places you can take this, but there's also a downside to it, that you can just go in a face value direction. You can just go in, oh, White Rose was right all along, and that White Rose's project was real, and things like that. And again, it's a fascinating idea. I just don't know if it's the right one for the show yet. Again, I really don't know if, what this episode is really going to mean. But like I said, the first half of this episode was so masterful. Elliot, Rami, Malek, and BD1 were just off the charts in terms of acting here. There was a lot of amazing stuff to unpack, and I did think they did do a really good job with the season 1 nostalgia. Again, regardless of me not really knowing how to feel about the second half of this episode, I thought that the nostalgia factor they really laid very heavy on, and I thought they did an excellent job with that. And they didn't beat you over the head with it also. I mean, they could have brought in Gideon or something. I like they didn't do that. I like that we even had Ollie back and things like that. I thought that was a really fun idea, and it did a really good job of kind of turning that on its head in a way, and I really did appreciate that. So overall, I definitely really did love this episode. I love the first half enough that I think I overall can give this episode an A-. I think there's a lot of really interesting ideas in here, but again, a lot of it's just going to be dependent on the finale next week and how much it really does deliver in that way. But over to guys to my review this episode of Mr. Robot. The most guys saw this episode overall, left your thoughts. And I'm sorry for rambling on, guys, but I mean, the second half of this episode is so perplexing, it's kind of hard to, talk about it in a coherent manner without just going off on a tangent, because we truly don't know where it's going to go, and it just, went completely off the rails in that way. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.